Thank you, thank you. Veterans Day has come and gone, and there were several veterans around the city who were honored, and I was privileged to make a presentation to a club in here in town. And they had 3 veterans from World War II to come in and talk, and so I had 2 guys who were in from the Air Force, and then I was asked to come in and talk. So I'm going to talk about my Navy experience. Well, all started in early January of 1943. 1943, I was drafted, I became 1A. And the lights went out.
Sorry.
That's all right. I became, is that going to be enough light, Jimmy?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So I'm 1A, and I'm in a high school. I'm 17 years old in high school, and I'm 1A, and I'm going to be drafted. So I go down to the draft board and I ask for an extension. Give me a deferment until I get out of high school. Fine. Say, okay, you're free until June when you get out of high school. I graduated on the 4th of June. On the 24th, I was inducted. I had a chance when I was inducted to go for either the Army, the Navy, or the Marine Corps, and I chose the Navy because I had 2 brothers already in the Navy. And the first thing they did was they moved me out with a bunch of other locals out to Farragut, Idaho, which is a boot camp. And we were there for, what, maybe 8 weeks. They get your shots, they learn how to march with a dummy rifle, and how to do things together. And from that little excursion at the boot camp, I got a raise and I got a leave, went back to my home in Duluth, Minnesota, came back again, and then they said, the Navy says, well, we have several trade schools that we'd like to offer you. You can either be a gunner, or you can be a mechanic, or you can be a cook. I said, I want to go to radio school. And they said, why? I said, well, I already know the radio code. I can copy 12 words a minute. It was a little lower, but you know, I said, it sounded good. Said, yes, we'll send you to radio school. So they sent me to a radio school at the University of Idaho, at Moscow, Idaho. That lasted for a while. And we had to learn how to be a radio operator so that we could stand watch on board the Navy ships. And that was a nice training. It was very good. I learned how to do it well. Come the end of the class, I got a promotion and a leave. Went back home again to Minnesota. And while I was out at home on leave, my folks are saying, Jim, there's something happening. The people, everybody, our neighbors, are being quizzed by somebody. Somebody's coming around and talking to all of your references that you made when you came into the Navy. Well, I said, I don't know what's going on. Well, I got back after that, and I found out that I was selected to go to an advanced radio school. And that was going to be up in Seattle, Washington. And I got up there, and we didn't know what it was all about. And anyway, the first thing they did was say, raise your right hand. You solemnly swear anything that you see or do here will be strictly but secret, top secret. Everything you learn from here on out will be top secret. Well, I say, yes, of course. And so we start in to do something different. And we're not longer being trained to be a radio operator on board a ship, but we are being trained to copy the Japanese, and we are going to become radio spies. Well, what did it mean? It meant learning the Japanese codes instead of the American codes. It means learning how to a different typewriter, where the letters that you typed, Japanese characters would appear up there on the paper. But we had to learn how the Japanese operators worked. And so we went through that course, and that went well. And I got another leave and a raise, went home, came back again, and then they're going to say, well, I wonder where we're going to go. We're not going to be on board ship, but I wonder where we're going to go. Went into the barber shop to get a haircut, and the man says, hey, we hear you're going to Adak. Oh, is that right? Is that? He says, oh, that's good duty, good duty. There's a woman behind every tree. Guess what? No trees. Not a tree on the island. So we're destined to go to Adak. We get on board a Liberty ship, the SS Carl Schurz. And it's, well, they used to call them Kaiser's coffins because they were sometimes not made well, and in rough weather they would break up and sink. But we didn't, we had some rough weather, and I had my share of hanging over the side of the ship. You know, when you're seasick, you know what they say, first you're afraid you're going to die, and then you're afraid you're not going to die. That's what it feels like. But as we were approaching Dutch Harbor, they said that they spotted a periscope. And we were the first ship that left Seattle up to Dutch Harbor without a naval escort. But there was the periscope that we had to contend with, and the ship is zigzagging, and I'm sleeping with my life jacket on, and we didn't get it, but didn't get the torpedo. We got into the PX at the Army base at Dutch Harbor the next day, get something good to eat, a milkshake, something like that, and one of the Army guys says, what ship were you guys on? I said, well, on Carl Schurz. Hey, Tokyo Rose told us she sunk you last night. Well, she didn't make it, so we stayed. Then we went out to the wonderful island of Adak, where we were going to learn to be radio spies and to put into practice what it was that we had learned. Larry, can I see that first chart, please? Now, what all is involved when you're a radio spy? It means that we're copying messages that Japanese are sending from their home islands to wherever their ships and bases are out around the Pacific. And we have very good listening equipment, and we have very big antennas. And so we copy messages here. Now we have other stations also up and down the coast, San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, and they're also copying. And we have stations that are out in the Pacific also, out here in Honolulu, and they're copying these messages too. The minute we copy a message, it gets sent by radio teletype to Washington, D.C. Now, we don't know what we're copying. We only have funny-looking numbers and names, but they send these down to Washington, D.C., where they are decrypted, and they pick out the intelligence that's there, and then they're sent to the admirals, whatever, in the Navy to see what they can do with it. But we are up here, not much to do. We're living in Quonset huts. The wind is cold and windy, and the PX is a long ways away. And they have beer there, but I wasn't drinking beer at the time, so I never drank any of the beers. Everybody wanted to get my chits so they could have extra beers. Well, anyway, Adak is on the southern tip of the Aleutian Islands here. Russia is right over here. Anyway, everybody's learning how to copy the Japanese and send the messages in to the admirals to find out what the intelligence is that they can use. And then, but there's another interesting part about it, and that is, as long as we can hear them, is there a chance that we can find out where they are? Yes, there is a way that we can find out where they are. It's called radio direction finding. And here's what happens. Honolulu station here says he's hearing a particular station. Could be a ship, could be a submarine, could be just a convoy or something, whatever. And he sends out a message to all of these stations here up and down the coast. And he says, tune your direction finding equipment to this particular spot on the dial. And when you get that spot on the dial, I want you to get a bearing. And then let me know about it. So, I'm up here in Adak and I get a bearing. Everybody here does too. Now what happens is, Honolulu says, send me your bearing. So I send him a bearing of 260 degrees. It's all done with code, just a couple of numbers, easy. But he knows what's coming and he gets those three numbers. 260 degrees puts it on this line. Seattle says, I'm at 240. So Honolulu draws a line from here to here. San Francisco draws his line here. San Diego draws a line here. So the people in Honolulu now know where this unknown enemy ship is. And that's important stuff to know. And as a matter of fact, after the war was over, the admirals openly gave credit to the radio spies for success that was happened in the battles of Midway, Coral Sea, and Wake Island. They said that the information they got from the radio spies was very indicative and helped them to win those battles. So it was nice. It was good to know later on. But incidentally, it was 40 years after I got out of the Navy before I found out that I could talk about what I had done. When I was discharged, I got a paper that said, the only thing you're allowed to say is, you were a radio operator, and nothing more. It wasn't until 40 years went by that I was permitted to say, yes, I was copying the Japanese. I was a radio spy. Well, the war got over, and I had a a good time? No. It was good service. There were good things to do. It was cold and windy and dry and rainy and snowy. And others had better duty, but it was not so bad for me because we were in a Quonset hut and we had good duty and good food. So, although it was lonely, we did what we could to help win the war. And it was very, very comforting to know that we were doing something positive to help the war effort. And, like I say, when the war was over, I got my discharge to go home. Couldn't say anything to my family, to anybody, about what I did. But later on, I found out that I could do that. And it was interesting to talk to my parents and friends and let them know what it was, like I'm telling you, what I had done during World War II as a radio spy. And that's my story.
Yay.